The Professors is brought to you by Blackborder.com. On the site shop, you can now pre-order Rise of the Eldrazi boxes, cases, intro packs, singles, and more. So support the show and go check out Blackborder.com today. Hello everybody and welcome to yet another episode of The Professors. This week, Rise of the Eldrazi is coming on fast, so we'll implement some of those format warping ideals I mentioned last week and take a look at the newest spoilers, including two of the best card type in Magic. So let's draw. As someone who puts a good 36 hours into Magic activities each week, I put lots of time into finding out everything about the game. That includes the storyline. Knowing the flavor is imperative to the speculation of a set. It lets you attempt to conclude, say, permanent types that might be in a set, and the sub-themes it might be based around. The delicious flavor of Magic's story allows us to conclude that, well, we know that Ulamog, Kozilek, and Emrakul are in fact not only godlike creatures, but technically speaking, corresponding places in Zendikar, or this new world that they're forming as well. It also lets us know all this information about... yeah, never mind. Enough of the hypothetical speculation. But as for the card that defines the flavor of this set, let's take a look at our last legendary mythic Eldrazi, Ulamog, the Infinite Gyre. Now, unlike Kozilek, this guy is even higher on the threshold in terms of mana costs, and will be even harder to cast in Limited. However, for 1 extra mana, while you don't get Emrakul level stats, Ulamog has Annihilator 4 and has sustainability on the battlefield thanks to its indestructibility. You also get an ability more powerful whilst in play against all other Eldrazi. But when comparing Ulamog to Kozilek, which would I rather play in this inevitable Eldrazi constructed deck? My answer is Ulamog. While he is 1 extra mana and less aggressively costed, and 4 cards are ridiculous, and dig you up an answer to opposing Eldrazi, indestructibility is an important failsafe, which will protect you from a multitude of answers to the Eldrazi. Lower on the chain, we see the second uncommon Eldrazi, and the first with different power and toughness. Arguably, though, this will prove one of the most useful Eldrazi, as one that is actually a later than late game play, which allows you to dig up all but the mythic Eldrazi. Artisan of Kozilek's Annihilator count is the lowest we've seen, equal to Ulamog's Crusher. But when doubling your Eldrazi forces, or erecting a smaller distraction to beat in with, or defend with, ain't bad either. Speaking of which, how viable is a Defender-esque deck or archetype becoming in Standard? Now, obviously the creatures with the ability have been relatively unsuccessful, because the traditional way you win is to attack with creatures so that they can deal damage, but when said creatures can't attack, you, well, don't win. However, when you can slow the game down with defenders above the 3 toughness threshold, as most are, and can then bring out direct damage dealers, you get ahead. Vent Sentinel idealizes the defensive strategy excellently and may deal enough damage in Limited for you to close the gap when the Eldrazi come a-stompin'. But what about Constructed? Well, let's say you're playing a red-white control deck with a sub-theme of defenders. You already have access to defenders like Wall of Reverence and Perimeter Captain, as well as the best 1-mana instance in Standard, Path to Exile and Lightning Bolt. You also get the Boy Scouts of America on your side, and currently one of the top 5 Planeswalkers, in my opinion, Ajani Vengeance. Ideally, you go first turn Perimeter Captain, second turn Zektar Shrine Expedition, third turn play and crack a fetch land and take out some of your opponent's creatures. Fourth turn play a Wall of Reverence, attack for 7 with a 7/1 elemental and gain 7 life at the end of the turn, followed by the damage launching Vent Sentinel, Bank Slayer Angel, and Ajani Vengeance, all appearing as a rather clunky strategy at first, especially compared to the synergistic and streamlined cover of Jund, but when you can block or lethally double block more than half of their creatures and then path the other ones, while fighting in the skies by the side of a Baneslayer and boarding in core Firewalkers and Celestial Purges, the situation appears skewed in your favor. As for an alternate Planeswalker in this deck, and is one of the best ever printed whose abilities all have use, much like Jace 2.0, we see Gideon Jura. While his +2 ability merely puts it into a safer range that can't be killed by 2 Jund creatures, having Repeating Vengeance is already worth 5 mana. But wait, you get a 6/6 for 5? Aside from the Vampire Hexmage scenario in which your walker's counters get removed, that's fine. A 6/6 human soldier already has potential with creatures like Captain of the Watch for White Weenie and Standard. But wait, how much does this ability cost? 7 loyalty counters? Not exactly. While the change isn't permanent, and thus you have to reactivate it every turn, this ability costs merely 0 loyalty. So these are the 5 Planeswalkers of the Zendikar block year, right? With Nissa Ravane, Sorin Markov, and Chandra Ablaze in Zendikar, Jace the Mind Sculptor in Worldwake, and Gideon Jura in Rise of the Eldrazi. Can we have another one? I mean, after all, there were only 5 Planeswalkers in the lower ones and Shards years. The answer is yes, we can have another one. Sarkhan the Mad represents the true dissension from a Planeswalker, as one that readily comes in with 7 loyalty counters and effectively lets you use what I consider his ultimate ability right away. And while you probably won't want to use this ability right away, save if you're playing the Crucible of Fire plus Dragonwell Type 2 deck, its first 2 abilities will make the card see play in Jund. The card, thankfully, makes Jund take more skill to play. Just a little bit more skill, as gauging to use the Dark Confidant ability versus sacrificing a 1/1 Saproling for a 5/5 Flying Dragon is, well, a no-brainer, because offensive player equals make 5/5, but on the defense, you search up your removal. He's already out of range of burn, and stays healthily above the multiple of 3 range when coming in. Also, an important note on the Bob Mare ability. This first ability still costs 0, so with an average casting cost in Jund of roughly 2, you can use the ability 4 times without any restrictions on, say, pulling out a Broodmage Dragon or second Sarkhan when he only has 1 loyalty counter remaining. But past these advanced, multifaceted ways to win the game, what of a simple way? Near-death experience is one of my favorite win conditions. It forces your opponent to have to try to win the game in 1 turn or stop you from equalizing your own life total when they pass the turn. In a red-white control deck, potentially a sibling of the one I mentioned earlier, which lets you manipulate your own life total while burning out your opponent's creatures or dwindling their total instead of yours. This position in which you get to make the decision between burning you or your opponent is just plain confusing to the other side, but also a multifaceted plan which the current standards burn spells graciously allow. Let's take a look at a potential list I've tested some. As for the other side of control, remember what color was pretty good at controlling things in Standard about a year ago? Yeah, well, with a likely slower format, Magosian Sphinx will mark a ridiculous controlling creature. While it doesn't have Shroud, permanents like Jace with his Fate Sealing ability make this world safe for a Sphinx like this. And, well, after you've cast this card, look at that card advantage. This instant speed card draw brings back, even at a technically high mana cost, a ridiculous tool that Blue needed right about now and succeeds Treasure Hunt. Mark my words, this creature will be the founder of Blue's ability to have a suitable place in the metagame, while basing this suitable place in the realm of permanence. However, where Blue moves to the realm of winning with permanence, Red moves out. It has always been observed that Lightning Bolt is ridiculous, but even 4 of them can't straight up dome your opponent for 20. True enough, but what about 12 Lightning Bolts? Surreal Memoir may just become Red's new utility card, and offer you a chance to straight up dome your opponent while you can remain ignorant to their Firewalkers, while sideboarded Punishing Fires and Unstable Footings are still a necessity. This deck is allowed to work on one of Mark Twain's philosophies that all you need is confidence and ignorance, and success is sure, as red decks should. And with Lightning Bolt, Searing Blaze, Hellspark Elemental, Ball Lightning, Hell's Thunder, Burst Lightning, and Zektar Shrine Expedition, we see a deck basis forming that will curve out for Surreal Memoir and likely chump the Jund decks, Control decks, and Eldrazi decks because of speed. Our next mono-red card, however, will see play not because of its speed, but likely because of the inevitable comparison and likeliness to Figure of Destiny. The fact is, the Dragonlord will be played, despite being worse than our original Figure of Destiny. Much worse. Obviously, the sorcery speed leveling and fact that the card gets into combat a turn later is the major point. However, in terms of these creatures' second set of levels, it can only be activated on turn 4, while Figures can be triggered on turn 3. And while flying is nice, it's usually unnecessary when Figure can be pumped at instant speed, and thus allows you to threaten Trickster in combat. Also, there aren't, and weren't during Standard last year, any playable 3 or 4 drop creatures with the toughness to take down your Figure. Lastly, while the Dragonlord's final stage can be reached with only 10 mana, while Figure required 11 in total, I'd much prefer to threaten my 6th turn 8/8 flyer with First Strike while holding the combat tricks than a 5th turn 8/8 flyer that requires I put all my red mana into it. However, I do prefer the Dragonlord's last stage for what you can do afterwards with excessive amounts of mana. Though, at that point, you'll probably still have more important spells to cast, i.e. Lightning Bolts. Where Figure gave the rather arbitrary ability of First Strike only good versus Demigod of Revenge, the Dragonlord gets Trample and Fire Breathing, 2 antithesis ideas for the white deck. In summation, this guy will prove at least sideboard worthy, next to those Comet Storms you gathered at the Worldwake pre-release, because of its mana-intensive ability, but ranks below Figure of Destiny in playability, in the end. Our last card of this week is not the rather slow and nearly redundant level up costs of Jiraga Treespeaker, as he lacks the defensive power to make any ability that doesn't recur worth playing, or Calmly Hydra, which is certainly notable and playable, but simply runs into the traditional problem of dying to everything as your only big creature, but the level up creature who costs even more, Kazandu Tuskcaller. For 6 mana, likely by turn 3, you get an already fantastic token generator, and later in the game, a Call of the Herd plus Flashback. But the key here is that you can get elephants repeatedly without spending cards. This oft-forgotten advantage is one of the only remaining good things in the color blue, and it's cards like Treasure Hunt, but also some of the otherwise useless cycle creatures. So as a card that fills a niche in green, you can bet to see the Tuskcaller, and his possessed Dumbo friends fighting against the possessed Bambis of Jund, soon enough. Let me know what you think about everything from this week, and until next time, this is Anthony Palmario. On behalf of the Professors, we're tapped out for now, but we'll untap soon.